You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, chilling with my guy Frank Tucker, representing the Crib, South Florida. We collectively represent CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to the website for free. Use the promo code Miami30. And it's spring football is underway, Frank. It's finally here, and there's been a lot of headlines kind of here and there, players flashing, some players not. We'll get into all of that, and we'll also talk a little bit about the UA camp as well that we both attended. Lots of talent out there like we suspected, and a couple of names that kind of jumped out, maybe somewhat out of nowhere that weren't quite on the radar. We'll talk about your report that you together on CanesCounty.com. But let's talk about first and foremost the man of the hour, the man that was brought to help bring the U back here in 2024, Cam Ward, the quarterback transfer from Washington State, out there dealing, man. And he's not only just out there dealing, he's, from what we've heard from the players and the coaches, he's really stepping up as a leader and has total command of the offense. And I think what was really kind of missing from TVD from last year was the command from the offense, really kind of knowing the situation. And Coach Dawson pointed out last year one of the biggest issues was, of course, turnovers and red zone offense. And I think Miami is set to have a big jump in those areas. So this passing game has a chance to really kind of take off, especially with Cam Ward at the helm and with these receivers just balling as they have been this spring. What's your take on what this passing game can do here in 2024 from what you've seen so far?
I think it can finally lift Miami to double-digit wins, something we haven't seen in a little bit. Cam Ward is getting everybody excited right now, and there's a good reason why. We've had incompetent quarterback play even since the last time Miami did win double-digit games with Malik Rozier. And I think the Malik Rozier was a tough football player, but there hasn't been Heisman-level quarterback play for a long time at the University of Miami. Right now, you have the potential of that with Cam Ward. Just that viral play that you just put up where he's throwing that pass to Xavier Restrepo vertically, there's excitement in the air at practice. There's a sense of confidence with the guy at the helm. There's no quarterback competition going on, right? Like there's no need to push Cam Ward with somebody else behind him. He's the guy. And I think that there's a really good supporting cast around him as well. Just that running back room is loaded, right? We're going to get Mark Fletcher back healthy sooner than later. You got some experience in Henry Parrish, right? We got A.J. Allen, who's an explosive player, plus Jordan Lyle, who's going to be a freshman coming in here in the summer. There's so much talent at that running back position, but there's also a lot of talent at that wide receiver spot. You see what Restrepo is doing and the connection that they already have, him and Ward. JoJo looks like an absolute stud early on in the spring. Obviously, it's only been a couple practices, but he looks smooth. He looks fast. Like a lot of the freshmen being just a month and a half in, they look physically improved since they were in high school. Zaquan Patterson's already put on like 10 pounds. JoJo Trader looks a little bit bigger and a little bit faster, which that means that this weight training program and this training overall on-field stuff is working at the University of Miami. I'm really excited to see what happens with this group, but I think that it can be special. I think there's potential for, once again, 2 or more guys to push for that 800-yard mark. JoJo being a guy that could be a freshman All-American. We know that Jacoby and Xavier Restrepo have done it already in this offense, but there are some other guys that we're excited about. I know you and I were talking before about Robbie and Ray Ray. Those are 2 guys that were the JoJo of the last class, essentially, right? And there was a lot of excitement there as explosive guys inside the slot, preferably. And I think that they're going to take big jumps this year. And I think we're going to see a huge jump from Elijah Lofton, who they gave him a chance to be one of the first guys to talk to the media. And we're starting to see some of his personality really shine through. And I think that if he's healthy, we're going to finally see this offense utilize the tight end position at the University of Miami.
You mean Elijah Arroyo?
I mean, Elijah Arroyo. I'm sorry, Elijah Arroyo.
Yeah.
Elijah Arroyo.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really excited for Elijah Arroyo. I mean, this is a guy who, came out of high school as a really touted tight end and, suffered through injuries for back-to-back years now. And to me, he finally looks like the guy that we've been waiting for him to be when I saw him in practice this week. I mean, he just looks explosive. His route running really clean. We already know that he's a great blocker as well. He's really just an all-around great tight end. So really excited for him and Elijah Lofton as well. He looked pretty good, being that this is, his first time in a college football uniform. So I'm really excited to really kind of see what he can do as well at that tight end position. Shannon Dawson kind of jokingly said that, maybe you guys won't keep asking me how we're not using the tight ends anymore. So I think even he is excited about utilizing the tight end at a school that is supposed to be tight end but you're right on with these receivers, man. That catch that I showed, just kind of starting off with Xavier Restrepo, I saw it in person, and when I saw him, well, what you don't really kind of see on the video is that Powell is pretty much holding him the entire time. Like, up until he's about to catch the ball is when Powell kind of lets him go, and that's why the ref there kind of throws the flag. But the fact that he just kind of contorted his body and he caught that really with one hand, I mean, Xavier Restrepo has a chance to be an All-American this year based on what I've seen, based on just what we've seen from him last year, second year in the offense with, let's just say, arguably, since we haven't seen it yet, a better quarterback now. I think everything is really kind of pointing towards him being that type of guy on a national stage. And I think all these young guys that are starting to really come up is really going to push a Jacoby George. I think Jacoby George is really going to be pushed to his limits because these young guys are coming, bro. JoJo, like you said, making, he caught bomb after bomb on Wednesday. And, Robbie looked really, really fast out there, burning guys. Even Shamar Kirk out there was looking pretty good as well, getting open often. So, yeah, I think this offense is really going to take off. And I think it's going to take off even more because of Cam Ward's running ability. The fact that he is a threat to run and the way he can kind of improvise outside of the pocket, I think it's going to open up that pass game even more where receivers can kind of break off routes and go deep and really cause havoc against a defense. So really excited to see what this offense can do, especially under year 2 with Shannon Dawson.
Yeah, listen, there's a number of South Florida receivers in this group that are the top guys in this unit. You got to have a quarterback that kind of plays a South Florida brand of football at the quarterback position, in my opinion. I think that the arm angles, his ability to push the ball vertically, the confidence to be able to give his guys a chance, and the toughness to be able to run when maybe something's not there. The guy had, 8 rushing touchdowns last year? Like, there's obviously something there that Miami didn't have before. Even if he's not Vince Young or Lamar Jackson running the ball, he's way more of a threat than what Miami had with Tyler Van Dyke. So I think that there's limitless potential with this offense. I think that the offensive line coming back is going to be huge as well. Obviously, you got to get Francis Mauigoa healthy. But overall, like Rivers comes back, he's extremely experienced. Carpenter, I think, was one of the biggest additions of the offseason. McCoy is supposed to take a step up, right? Samson Okunlola, the potential is wild with him as a former 5-star prospect. This is what the Miami offense is supposed to look like from a talent perspective, in my opinion. And I think that you finally got the quarterback that can take things to that next level. And the beautiful part about it is, even if the quarterback goes down, you got two guys that I think are competent enough to keep this offense afloat as well. Ross Poffenbarger, I think I'm saying it right?
Poffenbarger.
Poffenbarger, right? He's another tough football player, right? He's not Cam Ward. Let's not, make it seem like there wouldn't be a drop off, but I think that he's a guy that has made some plays, maybe hasn't played on the highest level, but played at a high level. Sorry about that. But played at the highest level at the FC, played at a really high level in FCS. You can only go and play against the competition that's in front of you. And when he did, he was really, really good. So I'm excited to see, what this offense is going to look like, and I think it's going to be really good.
What's exciting to see about this team is that this team has depth. This team has depth at every position now. I mean, the only one, that you could say, and we're just talking offense right now, is maybe, I guess, tight end. But even tight end is kind of deep. You got, Cam McCormick, you got Elijah Arroyo, Elijah Lofton, Jackson Carver, and Riley Williams. I mean, that's a pretty deep room, and that's probably the room that's probably has the least amount of depth on that offense, because that quarterback room is loaded, Frank. It's loaded. You got Poffenbarger, you got Ward, and then you got Emory Williams, who has experience. You got Jakari Brown, who has experience. And then you got a really tall quarterback in Judd Anderson, man. I mean, he's near 7 feet. I mean, at least that's what it looks like when you see him in person. And he's out there buying into the culture, working after practice with Carver and Nathaniel Joseph and Shamar Kirk. So I think, being in a room like that, I think you got something there with Judd Anderson for the future. And then, I think the fact that you don't have certain players playing in the spring, it's kind of a blessing in disguise here. The fact that you don't have a Mark Fletcher or AJ Allen gives an opportunity for players like, Chris Johnson and Chris Wheatley Humphrey and Trevante Citizen to finally get the reps that they want in the spring to really kind of show what they can do. And then on the offensive line, it's the same thing with Francis Mauigoa not being able to go for this spring. You got players like, Markel Bell that's playing with the second team. He just got here, but playing with the second team. You got players like Luis Cristobal, getting some reps with the first team, and Samson Okunlola getting some reps with the first team as well. And players like Tommy Kinsler, Logan Sagapalu, excuse me. So it really just gives you just a bunch of depth just in case, one of these guys goes down, because obviously football is a game of attrition. There's going to be injuries. So this spring is really just establishing the depth that really is on this team. And I'm glad to see it. I feel like I haven't seen it in a long, long time at the University of Miami. But let's go over to the defensive side of the ball, where you do have some guys out as well. Akeem Mesidor not playing. He was, walking around in uniform, so to speak, because they're only in shorts and, and helmets or whatnot. Friday, they are supposed to be in pads. So that would be interesting to see them really, start to hit each other. And, you got guys like Francisco Mauigoa not playing in the spring as well. No Damari Brown. So this gives an opportunity for some of these other guys to really show what they can do as well. On that side of the ball, who do you think really will, show, what they can do and really kind of flash?
Obviously, I'm biased. Zaquan is the guy I continue to talk about, and I think that he looks really good through his first couple of practices in the spring, physically especially. But the Mishael Powell kid, I think that he's going to be that veteran addition on the back end of this defense that they're going to need. Just the fact that he's able to play corner, able to jump into the slot and play nickel, play over the top at safety is going to be huge, because I think that physically you have a lot of guys that can be moving parts, right? We know what Josiah Richards can. I mean, we know what Jadias Richards can do as a cornerback after last season, but he's also got the length to be able to play safety as well. And I think that they're going to cross train him into that role. You also have Savion Riley, who is a guy who could play in the nickel or play at safety. Daryl Porter, a guy who can play at nickel, play on that corner spot. Damari Brown, he's 6'2", 200 pounds. When he comes back, we know that he has the technical prowess to be able to play anywhere on the back end of this defense. I love what they're able to do with chess pieces of this defensive backfield. And I think that Mishael Powell is going to be at the centerpiece of that, because he is so good. I know that on that play, he was the guy that got cooked by Xavier Restrepo. But listen, it's one-on-ones. Guys get got. And it just was his moment to get got. But he played on one of the best teams in America last year. We know he has the experience. He has had game-winning plays, has been a guy to make plays underneath, is a strong tackler. He just does everything right. So I think that he's going to be the guy that's going to be the key to how well this defense does. And, going to the combine, if you look at what Cam Kinchens and James Williams did, I know that we love them as football players, especially as South Florida guys, but they were two of the most unathletic safeties in recent memory at the NFL Combine, right?
Oh,
So
man, you're gonna get some hate for that comment.
it's just factual, right? They were two of the most unathletic safeties in the history of in the recent history of the NFL Combine, right? If Lance Guidry can coach these guys up on the back end of the defense, and they can be twitchier players, guys that can make plays on the ball same way, but with a little bit more explosiveness, maybe the sky's the limit for this defensive backfield. And it's not saying that Cam and James aren't great players. We know what they can do. They've been great since Little League, right? Like, they were All-Americans in high school. Cam was an All-American at Miami. James had a breakout season this past year, was really good. But physics are physics, right? And if you can get guys that are good players, like Mishael Powell, who is proven to be a really good player, right? Savion Riley, who is shown at times as a young player at Vanderbilt and in the SEC that he's a really good player. Zaquan Patterson, who was a 5-star prospect coming out of Chaminade, same caliber player that Cam Kinchens and James Williams were, but maybe a better athlete. You might get even better production out of the back end of this defense under a guy who I think is one of the best defensive coordinators in America. And there's a reason that schools like LSU and USC were going after him. It's because he is a mad scientist on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that he's going to get so much out of this group. And it's going to be fun to see, because I think that there were times where the safeties were the problem. Miami did get beat over the top time and time again, right? There were issues when guys were in man coverage, or they got, someone bit on their toes. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be so much of an issue this year. I know when they were looking for safeties, they bypassed on some good players because they wanted guys that could play man coverage in the slot if they needed to. They got two guys that they feel can do just that. And I think that they got the right unit out there for that group, especially when you got young corners on the outside of Daryl Porter. All right, well, like, we know Daryl Porter's an experienced guy. He probably had the best cornerback season we've seen in a while at the University of Miami, but Richard is still going to be young. He hasn't had a full season as a starter yet. Damari Brown is still young. There were moments where he probably could have been a little bit better last year, but he did have some high points. There's going to be some growing pains there. And if you have a really strong back end of that defensive back group, it's going to help them tremendously, especially with Damari probably missing the whole entire spring. So, listen, it's going to be fun to see, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. Jadias Richard, I do believe, yeah, will probably go through some growing pains as well, because from what I saw from him at spring practice, he was a little grabby. I mean, he got flagged twice, from what I saw, and we all know we don't get a lot of time to view practice, and just with the little time frame that we did see practice, I saw him get flagged twice for pass interference against Jacoby George, where it was clear it was just he was just a little bit too grabby. So that's the fear that I guess I have of Richard. I think he's got all the potential in the world. I think he more than likely starts at either the nickel spot or the other corner spot for Miami. But I think he does go through some kind of growing pains, similar to kind of how Damari Brown went through some growing pains last year as well. So it'll be interesting to see which corners they do throw out there. I did see Demetrius Freeney as well. He was getting some reps as well. So he's coming back from injury, so he is also going to be in the mix for one of those defensive back spots as well. So it's great to see that he's getting some reps, with the first team, because you know injuries do happen. We saw it last year with Daryl Porter, getting injured in that NC State game. So when that does happen, you don't want to feel like, oh no, who's coming in after him, because at times we did feel that way last year. And like you said, to your point, there were some times where Miami was beat at coverage. I mean, one that kind of jumps out for me, it was the game against Georgia Tech. And then, also what's the guy from North Carolina that kind of beat
Yeah, Tez Walker.
Tez Walker. He kind of had himself a day in Chapel Hill that day against the Hurricanes. So that's definitely an area where you kind of want to see them take it to the next level. And with Lance Guidry being focusing on the defensive backs, him being a former defensive back himself, and to your point, he made James Williams and Cameron Kinchens probably look better than what they are athletically are. I'm excited to see what he could do with a Michelle Powell and a Savion Riley here in year two with the Hurricanes. When it comes to spring ball, though, for me, it's like you want to see certain players take that next step up, and I mean, because what you're going to get from a Restrepo, what you're going to get pretty much from a Jacoby George, Ruben Bain. Now, at this point, Francisco Mauanoa, like I said, kind of a blessing in disguise that he's not playing, because you already know what you're going to get from him, both Mauanoa brothers. So which player for you will just kind of make you feel good about the Hurricanes if they take a step up here in the spring?
Papa O'Gary. I think he's the guy that is in a position to take that third linebacker spot this year. We saw how valuable it was last year, and I think that he has – listen, if you ask anybody from South Florida about Papa O'Gary, they rave about this kid since he was like 8 years old. Like, he was an all-American type running back as a young kid that used to just dominate the whole entire age group, and came up all the way through as a four-star linebacker, a highly ranked kid that at one time was supposed to be going to Alabama, right? So For me, I think that he's really talented. I think that he has the tools that this staff wants at the linebacker position. And listen, we both love Wesley, right? But again, sometimes when you get those South Florida players, you get those big plays, but you also get those brain farts. And I think that Wesley at times is one of those guys that sometimes we put on the edge, that Miami puts on the edge, right? So where you're using those athletic traits and you're using that ability to get to the ball, but you need a guy that can play as a true backer next to Kiko Mauanoa. And I think that Papo might be the guy to be able to do just that. And the beautiful thing is that he redshirted last season. He got 3 to 4 years more of a guy who has all ACC potential at the inside linebacker position for me. And I think that he's going to be a breakout player in the spring that's going to get a ton of reps. I think that, listen, that's a really loaded linebacker group because they brought in so many guys in that 2023 class. And then you brought in 2 more in this one. Darius Hayes is a freak athlete. They call him Hitman for a reason.
Yeah.
I think that he's going to be a guy on special teams that's going to be a demon. And if there are injuries, wouldn't be surprised to see him on the field, but he's going to take some acclimation. Marcellus Pulliam, another guy that looked good last year when he got into the games, was a star in Georgia at the linebacker position. Physically fits the mold at 6'2", 6'3", 225, 230 pounds. But Papo, to me, is the most game-ready guy right now amongst that group. And I think when we get to the spring game, he's going to be a guy that is just flashing all over the place. He's going to be in every single tackle type player. And I think we're going to be talking about him as one of the winners when we talk about the guys that have come out of spring review-wise.
Yeah, for me, just to stay with the linebacker position, Bobby Washington, man. Bobby Washington has all the athleticism in the world, man. He's just super fast, super athletic, has the talent to just be a really good linebacker for the University of Miami, but you really kind of haven't seen it too much. You've seen some flashes on special teams or whatnot, but you kind of want to see him take that next level. So if take that step to the next level, because if he does, then you're like, whoa, you're already seeing it from McGuire. You're already kind of seeing it from Pulliam. If you see it from Bobby Washington, along with a Wesley and a Francisco Maunoa, I mean, yeah, this linebacking core is going to be unreal for the next couple of years if you start to see some flashes from him. On the other side of the ball is Riley Williams. I kind of want to see him take that next step. You saw some flashes from him last year. He was the only tight end to score a touchdown for the Hurricanes last season. He's getting better when it comes to blocking. He kind of, stumbled out of the gate naturally when it comes to blocking, but got better as the year went on. And then lastly, it's Trevante Citizen for me, Frank. I really want to see Trevante Citizen take that step to the next level because, he's out there practicing. Even Duke Johnson is out there, talking to him, trying to, coach him up a little bit. I think if he takes it to the next level, you already know what you're getting from Mark Fletcher and Henry Parrish, pretty much. AJ Allen as well. I mean, you saw some flashes from him. Got injured a couple of times, and so you saw some inconsistencies from Allen, but I expect him to be a factor. Last season, I mean, we all remember him leaping over a player in that Texas A&M game, scores the winning touchdown and 2-point conversion against Clemson. But if Trevante Citizen really kind of takes his game to the next level and we see him play healthy like we're seeing from Elijah Arroyo now in camp, then I feel really, really good about that running back room because he's basically the same size of Mark Fletcher. Mark Fletcher, looks like this huge guy compared to the other running backs, but you put him next to Trevante Citizen, they're pretty much looking like twins next to each other. So if you got another big bruising running back, that can also take it the distance as well, because I think he might be even a little bit faster than Fletcher coming out of high school from what I saw. I know he ran track as well. So I think you really have something with Trevante Citizen. Speaking of guys that, I guess that are down a little bit on the depth chart, let's talk a little bit about players that are not really kind of showing up, I guess, and you would guess that might hit the portal at the end of spring. Who for you is like on that radar, Frank? I can't hear you. for me on that radar, there's a couple of guys, but I want to let Frank chime in first here. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. Hope you can hear me now. But Chase Smith is a guy that I think is going to be on his way out sooner than later at the University of Miami. I think that he has the size, the speed, the athletic profile that you want at pretty much any defensive position at the University of Miami, but he hasn't been able to put it together, whether it's been injuries or acclimation to truly playing the linebacker position. I just don't foresee him being a guy that is going to be able to leapfrog so many guys that are so talented at that linebacker spot, because it's not the same as when he first came to the University of Miami, right? You were able to take a project like a Chase Smith and kind of be a little bit more patient because there weren't those guys at the linebacker position. Miami for a long time was inept at recruiting the position under Manny Diaz for whatever reason it was. He just couldn't do a good job of getting the best guys into the program. And now you have almost too many guys at the position, right? Like, we're talking about guys who were borderline 5-stars like Malik Bryant having a tough time getting in the rotation, right? Bobby Washington is a freak of nature that you were just saying could be a breakout player, that he could be the starter or he could be a guy that only plays special teams. We realistically could never see him on the field in prominent game action. And that's crazy to think about because he's a 6'3", 220-pound guy that probably runs about a 4.4 40.
Right.
So the attributes that Chase Smith brought to the table before would have been something that could have pushed him onto the field a little bit quicker, especially after an injury. Now I feel like he's the guy on the outside looking in. He's a roster filler, and with about 8 or 9 guys that they're probably gonna have to cut from this roster to get to that magical number of 85. I think he's going to be one of those guys that might not even want to leave, but might be forced out just because there just isn't any room.
Yeah, I hear you. A couple of guys for me, because when I look at the roster, I'm just like, oh, this guy's still on the roster. Brian Ballum, like this guy's still here. Michael Redding, like this guy is still here with all these receivers that we talked about. I don't see, JoJo obviously is going to surpass him, and he just got here. Those are the guys for me that kind of jump off this page for me. I'm with you on Chase Smith, although he did look pretty good from what I saw in spring. So I don't know if he's taking, a step up here. And the other guy, this is your guy, bro. Ahmad Moten, man. Is he going to kind of test the waters at a place where he could probably start right away? Because at this point, I don't see him, like, if we have a healthy Mesidor and we have a healthy Harrison Hunt, I don't see him starting past those guys. And then you got other guys that will be in the rotation with him, like a Joshua Horton, maybe a Justin Scott will be in the rotation with him. Who knows? I think that could be a player that may just kind of test the waters and be like, hey, I could start, somewhere else. Let me see, kind of where I could go. And the other player for me is Robert Stafford. Robert Stafford is another player for me, I think, kind of falling far down the depth chart here, especially when you bring in like players like Savion Riley, Damari Brown when he comes back, Jadias Richard, and Demetrius Freeney. Is getting reps over him as well. So, Zaquan Patterson just got in to the program and, already seeing the field seems like a little bit more than Robert Stafford. So those guys for me, I think, may test the waters in what's now college football free agency. But we'll see how it goes. Maybe these guys really start to flash or really kind of, step up. And other players that I'm kind of surprised, I guess, are still on the roster is Jonathan Dennis. I'm not, for me, it just feels like players like a Tommy Kinsler and a Samson Okunlola, Matthew McCoy are maybe a little bit higher on the depth chart than a Jonathan Dennis. Jonathan Dennis also out for spring. But he seems to always have that nagging injury since he had it, I believe, 2 years ago. So that's another player for me. And then, Zion Nelson is another player that's still on the roster. I mean, I could see him also maybe testing the waters as well. But wish the best for him, of course. So with all that being said, with spring, we had a great UA camp that we both attended. A lot of great players across the board. You had a story that you wrote about the top performers as it relates to their relation with Miami. Floyd Bugara just got offered by Miami, as well as others. Just your thoughts on that UA camp and players that Miami should really focus in on to build this 2025 class.
Well, everybody's eyes got open to two now big time prospects, in my opinion, as Derek Cooper, who was with the running backs, but he's a guy that probably ends up playing on the defensive side of the ball, in my opinion. He could play running back, he can play wide receiver, he could play outside linebacker if he keeps growing, or he could play safety. He's that athletic, he is that moldable. He is a 2026 kid that I think is going to be one of the top athletes in the country when it's time for him to sign his letter of intent. He's truly a special prospect. And I think that he's going to be a breakout player at Chaminade Madonna this year. We saw how he ran. We saw how he was able to run routes. We saw how different he looked physically than everybody else at the camp, regardless of position. I think he's going to be a guy that Miami pushes really hard for. And they're going to continue to try to build that pipeline at Chaminade. And I think, especially in that 26 class, he's going to be a key focus for Miami. The Floyd Bugara kid, he's obviously a newcomer in South Florida, not just for Miami fans with that offer, but 6'2", 6'3". I think we have him at 6'4". He looked a little bit shorter than that, but 285 pounds, 290 pounds is easily what he sits at. And he was the most fluid athlete on that defensive and offensive line group early on Sunday. He was technically sound. He used his hands, had counters, was able to flip his hips, had good footwork. He was just an overall top performer at that camp, again, regardless of position. He looked really good. Now, I don't think that he necessarily fits the mold physically of what Miami is looking for, but when you're so technically sound, it's going to boost you up as a prospect. And I think that Miami saw enough from him on film as a pass rusher. And now the fact that he's jumping at the chance to play a higher level of competition at Miami Central this year proves that he's a guy. And if Miami's looking for a guy that can jump from the one technique to the three technique and do a bunch of different things as an interior pass rusher, he's going to be a guy that I think moves up the rankings, probably going to be a Rivals 250 type player, and could be a big get for Miami if they really wanted to push for that. And then that wide receiver position, if you go look at that, you could probably name 10 guys that stood out for everybody. But for me, it was the trio of 2025 prospects that were probably head and shoulders the best there. And that was Javen Boggs, who's an Ohio State commit as of now, Cortez Mills, and Nashawn Montgomery. Cortez Mills was a vertical monster, as he usually is at Homestead. I think that he's probably around 6'1", 6'2" right now, and he fits the mold of what Miami's looking for on the outside as a guy that can just go get it. They got a ton of speed on their offense right now, a lot of young speed, and I think that he could be a guy that gives you a mix of route running prowess and head top ability that would be a really good addition at the University of Miami. And then Nashawn Montgomery, I say it every time, the kid is just smooth. At 6'2", 170, 175 pounds, he fits the mold of a guy like a Justin Jefferson. And I'm not comparing him to the best wide receiver in the NFL right now, but physically that's what he looks like. And that's kind of how he runs. Natural hands. There were some questions a couple years ago when he first came to South Florida about drops and things of that nature. He has become an absolute perfect target because he doesn't drop anything. He's able to make one-handed grabs, has an elite catch radius. The route running is there. Him and Cortez Mills, both who play for Raw Miami and 7-on-7, would be guys that I think Miami needs to push the hardest for. I think you're probably going to miss out on guys like Vernell Brown and Jamie French. And Dallas Wilson's going to be a tough get from a school like Oregon that he says was his dream school and the reason that he committed right away once he got that offer. I think that you could fill those two outside spots because there is a need for the need at the position outside of Wade and Charles in 2020 and 2025. That would be home run gifts, and they proved it at this camp once again. And on the defensive side of the ball, the linebackers are always going to be a little bit tougher to look at, but I think that Ezekiel Marcelin had a really good day. I think Adam Balgun Ali is a guy that in 2026 is going to be in the conversation for top 5 player at that spot. He is 6'2", 205 pounds at least, basketball background. He is a plus athlete at the position and had a demeanor of a much older kid. Like when you got a chance to talk to him, he was extremely professional. He was physically built out. He is the prototype at the linebacker position. And I know Miami missed out on Amari Williams. He was the guy that Miami liked in 2025 rather than him being a 2024 guy, especially at the edge spot. If they wanted to get back into Benjamin, this is the guy to go get at that school. And I think that, Miami's done a good job in West Palm Beach, and he's going to be one of those next prospects that they prioritize. So he's a name to probably monitor, especially with him being early on in his process. There's a chance for anybody to pretty much jump in here. And then at defensive back, for me, it was Chris Ewald and Ben Hanks. Chris Ewald and Ben Hanks, they're both about 6'1", 6'2", 170, 175 pounds, and they are just super balanced cornerbacks that don't have elite speed and aren't huge players, but they just do everything right. And they're very rarely caught, in a bad spot. They very rarely are out of coverage. If a guy makes a play on them, it's usually because they made a play on that kid. They're advanced coverage-wise for being, guys that are rising seniors. And they made play after play, PBUs. I think Ben Hanks even had an interception on Sunday. You're not going to win every rep, especially in off-coverage man and one-on-one settings, but they were close to doing pretty much just that. And I think that, it's surprising to me that Ben Hanks is still as wide open as he is at this point in his process because he is a major Florida legacy. His dad's in the Hall of Fame at that school. And it doesn't even seem like Florida's the main school for him. And he is taking multiple visits to the University of Miami and including an official. So I like how Miami's progressing with him there. And then Chris Ewald, listen, I know it's out there everywhere, that everybody's predicting him to the University of Miami. I think it's a little bit too early to predict it right now, but I think that if Miami continues to do what they're doing, and I think that Guidry and Chavis Jackson continue to build that relationship, which is still early on. It's still early in its process because Chavis Jackson just got hired. And if that keeps building, I think that he could definitely be a guy that ends up at the University of Miami, especially with the relationship he has with Zaquan Patterson. And safety, not a lot of guys do a great job in this camp. It's very similar to the linebacker spot because they're more like they're guys that have a more well-rounded game, right? Like Amari Wallace is a guy that when we see him tackle, he's going through people, despite him not being a big safety. But he looked good. I think physically he checked the box, right? You see his traps. He's built out now. His shoulders are getting much, much larger. He's looking like a safety now and not so much a nickel guy. I love how he's progressing as a player. And I think that his recruitment is starting to funnel to Miami, right? We saw double-digit kids from Miami Central come to University of Miami on Wednesday. There's a reason for that. The relationship between UM and Miami Central is a real thing. The pipeline is real. We've grabbed probably the 2 best prospects out of that school over the last 3 years, in Wesley Bissainthe and Ruben Bain, and with those guys, and Armando Blunt. And I think that the success of Ruben Bain and Wesley Bissainthe so early on in their careers is helping these kids visualize their potential at the University of Miami. And the chance to stay home and get on the field early is something that a lot of these kids are going to be able to do. Nashawn Montgomery is another guy at Miami Central now that he's a little bit closer. It's not so much him being in North Palm Beach, right? Like he's down here in Miami now. He's playing in the backyard. He's going to be a Traz pal. I think that Miami's got a really good chance to to continue to build that fence around Miami Central and 95th Street, and do that at two major schools in South Florida, which is Chaminade Madonna and the Rockets. So overall, I think those were pretty much the guys in 25 to look at. Obviously, guys like Josh Moore had a good day. Physically 6'4", 205 pounds. I think he could be a tight end. That's how big the kid is. And then if you look at the young quarterbacks, Diabell, Zach Katz, those are two guys with Miami offers that love what they're seeing from Miami right now. But I think that there's a little bit more of a distant conversation in regards to ending up with a commitment. So I would kind of narrow things down to that group. And please watch for Derek Cooper fans. He is going to be a guy in South Florida, and not just South Florida, but the country, because he's going to be one of the best players in the 26 class.
Yeah, I totally agree with you about Derek Cooper. I actually wrote a story on him on CanesCounty.com, as well as a story on CJ Ewald that is also on CanesCounty.com with the latest of how they feel about Miami. Derek Cooper, Miami's his dream school, and he grew up loving Frank Gore. So I think Miami's already in a really great place there. But as far as the defensive backs are concerned, I do want to agree with you on Ben Hanks. Ben Hanks had the one PBU on arguably, I think, the best receiver of the day, which was, to me, Winston Watkins. And he was the only person to really get a PBU on him. So Ben Hanks, it is a little bit surprising that he's not further along, I guess, in his process. And I don't think he, even though people think it's Florida, I don't think he goes there, man. I think Miami has the upper hand on the Gators, at least, and he may even end up somewhere else. But I think Miami has the inside track, so to speak, on all of these, the three that I have on the screen here with Chris Ewald, Ben Hanks, and Amari Wallace. Definitely was an outstanding group overall. Ezekiel Marcelin also made it to Miami yesterday as well. So though that pipeline continues to flow from 95th Street to Coral Gables, and of course more information from CanesCounty.com. Make sure you subscribe to the website. Use the promo code Miami30. That's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast on this edition. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel as well, live from Canes County, and also subscribe to this podcast on all platforms. Until the next episode.